Welcome back to another episode of Meredyth with a Y. I am your host, Meredyth Willits. And on today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Angela Jackson, a powerhouse in the world of innovation and education, a lecturer at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She's shaping the next generation of leaders in the education marketplace. Dr. Jackson was also the visionary behind the Future of Work Grand Challenge, a bold initiative to reskill 25,000 displaced workers into living wage careers in just 2 years. Her thought leadership has been featured everywhere from CNN to the Harvard Business Review, and she continues to drive the conversation around inclusive, sustainable solutions for the future of work. So stay with us. Hello, everyone. This is Meredyth with a Y, and I am your host, Meredyth Willits. Today, we are going to go deep, changing lives, and I am giving you the keys to the castle. Hello. You have a new book out called The Win-Win Workplace: How Thriving Employees Drive Bottom Line Results. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Meredyth. I'm so excited to share with you. The book just made the New York Times bestseller list, and so exciting because we wrote this for employers, but what we're seeing is that employees are really leaning in and curious about what these win-win workplaces are.
Yeah, and we're seeing such a shift in employees these days. I'm sure that all of the boomers, all of the Gen X do not know what to do with these kids who are not as inspired by the dollar as they are time off and all of these other things, and that they have opinions and that they want to be included. What are you seeing that inspired you to write this book, and where can we go from here?
Absolutely. I can actually just tell you a story. In the book, I feature a case study from a CEO. His name is Joe Nolan, CEO of Eversource. And he said to me, when he's talking to his fellow CEOs, they start complaining about Gen Z and millennials. He goes, Angela, I just stop them because I know that these millennials and Gen Zs are going to be the majority of my workforce. So although I can't claim to understand everything they're doing, I know for me to be an effective leader, I need to really make sure that I'm listening to them. And that's why I wrote this book, because we're seeing CEOs who are in this win-win workplace. They're approaching this new workplace culture, demands for employees with curiosity versus saying what I write in the book is a zero-sum workplace. Well, you should do it the way I do it because this is the way that it's been done. So all CEOs who are winning right now are approaching this with curiosity and saying, okay, how can we reimagine this workplace for this particular moment in time?
Yeah, and what I hear right there is people that really historically have not been vulnerable or put their ego to the side are having to do that now.
That's absolutely it. And if you think about what's happened in the workplace with generative AI, all of us are at the same starting point, really, in deciding in this moment, how's that going to impact jobs? How is that going to impact business? And so everyone's in a learning mode. There's one Fortune 500 company that I anonymize in the book, but what they've done around generative AI is in each business unit, they have someone who's dedicated to creating new case studies and use cases for generative AI because they don't really know what it's going to mean for their business. And they're depending on their rank and file employees to actually show them how they're thinking about and using generative AI. That takes a humility and curiosity that we haven't seen before in the workplace. And so that opens up this opportunity. And it's really why I wrote this book and saying, we've got some CEOs who are leaning into this with curiosity. We have others who are just doing it the old way. And the ones that are leaning in are being better positioned. They're keeping their A talent. They are best places to work. And that's what's going to be the differentiator when we think about the move forward in workplaces.
Yeah, and I think with the shift of culture just in life, right, is before it was because I said so, right? It's because I said so, because I'm the boss, that kind of energy. And these kids today, and I say kids could be anywhere up in the 30s and 40s right now, right? They don't really tolerate that thumb over them kind of energy. It's seen as sexist. It seemed as misogynist. It seemed as a what's the word, not violent workplace, but the workplace that's not comfortable to live inside of, they're like, hey, I don't need to be bullied in my job, and they go to HR because I said so really doesn't work anymore. And what are you seeing, or what are your thoughts if there's a CEO or a manager? I'm probably going to have a lot of managers out there listening to the show right now. Although I have a lot of friends that are CEOs that I have to send this to. What are the managers to do when they kind of aren't being taught this? Right, they're top down, are not teaching. Hey, lean in, listen to your employees, whatever. And so you've got this middle management that isn't being taught this way of win-win. And now they're working with employees and they're trying to figure out, like, hey, I'm not a CEO. I don't hold the power, but I want to implement this kind of strategy that Dr. Jackson is talking about today. What do you recommend for middle management to do with their in a day-to-day? We're in a board meeting, we're in an office, we're in that. How do you tell them to work through this?
Meredith, this is such an important question. And I actually wrote a chapter on this in the book, and it's called Moving Frontline Managers to Frontline Leaders. And it acknowledges exactly what you said. Most of us were promoted into management because we were great individual contributors, and we were never taught to manage. That's the difference. So, anyone that's a manager right now, I would say you actually do hold a tremendous amount of power. Any one person's experience of a job is really directly impacted to who their direct manager is. It doesn't matter what the CEO says, all the proclamations. It's really your relationship with your manager and your relationship with your direct report. So you do have a lot of power. The second thing I would say is a lot of the practices that you'll see that we outline in the book about thinking about, one, centering worker voice. So really understanding what's most important to the employee that's sitting in front of you about their job. Instead of saying people quiet quitting, ask people why they want to stay. What would make them stay?
I love
Call
that.
those stay interviews. The third thing I would just say is be humble. When your employee comes to you and they're telling you about a challenge in their life, in that zero sum workplace, it was like check anything personal at the door. You come here, you put your head down, you're getting a paycheck. We saw during COVID, we were brought into our coworkers' homes. We saw, their parents. We saw their caregiving with their children. We know that these are lived realities that impact someone's ability to show up at work. And so as a manager, sit back and be willing to listen and to ask, really, when you're in that one-on-one, how are you? And if they're like, fine, to come back and say, no, really, how are you? And really listen and think about what you can do as a manager and what the company can do to make sure that that person has their conditions met so they can actually be truly engaged in work.
Yeah, it's my last podcast. I had a gal on. She's a doctor of psychology, and we were talking about the Gen X, the boomer mentality of that compassion being a weakness, or that just that feeling that trying to like get yourself involved with either your child or your coworker or your employee. It's like it's not a weakness. And the way I see it is it goes back to that kind of military example of, if you connect with someone and they know that you actually care about them, they will walk through walls for you. Like they just will. Like people want parameters, people want leadership, people want connection. They want to go to a place that gives a crap that they are there and that their family is good. And when you have an employee, boss, manager, whatever relationship like that, I just look at that and I'm like, this person's going to do everything they can to show up or figure it out or make it happen. Why are people so stuck in their ways of not understanding that true connection is where you actually start to make a change in your business, in your company? And people are at home actually laying in bed going, how can I solve this problem? Versus I'm off, turn the phone off, I'm not answering an email. And how much more people will show up for you when there is that compassion.
When I think about workplaces, and we saw this with the case studies in the book, and I see this through my research at Harvard, as managers, I don't think we've ever been shown what this lack of trust and commitment is actually costing us individually and
Mm,
costing the business. I'll give you an example. Some research just came out from Harvard colleagues a couple of weeks ago that said of people who have a critical condition, a critical health condition, 42% of them have missed a doctor's appointment. And they've missed the doctor's appointment because they're afraid to tell their employer because they think that they'll have a target on their back or that the employer will look at them differently. If someone has a critical condition and they're not being able to go to their doctor, that means that person's not going to be there. And I don't know a manager who would ever push back on someone because they had a doctor's appointment, but that's what people are feeling. And that's what that lack of trust results in. And that's when people quiet quit, to your point, that's when people leave. So really checking in with your people, it doesn't cost you anything but time and a bit
yeah.
of empathy. I feel that Gen X is actually well positioned for this. There's a lot of things that we put up with in the workplace that I think, if, when I talk to my friends and colleagues, they're like, we should have pushed back. I think about when I got in super early, I wouldn't leave until my boss left, even if I
Yep.
had nothing to do. I was in my early 20s with tons of like student loans. And I was like, tell this story in the book. I was like surviving on a couple of dollars a day because that's all I had left after I paid my bills for food,
Yeah.
etc. um, I should have better advocated for myself. And as a manager, if someone was going through that, I would want to know. And today it's very complex. We're seeing mass layoffs with government jobs that used to be the most stable jobs ever. And so what happens when we're all watching that collectively? People start saying, okay, what about my job? Is it safe? I'm seeing all these things about generative AI. Is my job going to be eliminated? Are the robots taking it? And this is why leadership, those frontline managers who turn into leaders, this is the time to lead, to bring your employees into your thinking, to be a bit more empathetic, and really think about what are the conditions that will allow someone to show up fully and give their best to the company. That's good for the employee, but it's really good for the company at the end of the day.
Yeah, I see just productivity. I mean, like I said, if I feel appreciated, if I feel like this is my home, right? I'm in my home. This is my end game. This is where I am making the most money, right? Is my home, right? Be it my children, my marriage, the value. And so what I put into this, I know I'm getting out. So I'm going to do my very best. I'm going to make sure the walls are painted. I'm going to make sure there's not a leaky faucet because I'm in this, I'm vested. And I think that managers and owners are missing the fact that we want vested owner mentality employees who give a shit that the toilets are leaking, who don't just go, it's not mine, car's leased. You know what I mean? Like I'm just an employee who cares. We want people that go, oh wow, there's weeds on the sidewalk, the toilet's leaking, we just saw an issue with that company who isn't happy, because at the end of the day it's theirs mentally, physically, emotionally, because they spend 40 plus hours a day at there. And so what would you say to a manager or a business owner if they're listening right now? How can we get them to understand that a vested employee is an employee who's going to work 10 times harder than someone who is not cared about?
Absolutely. And in the book, we share this data that I led at Harvard is that when you have employees that have this, what we call also an ownership mindset, and that could be anything from they actually own a percentage of the company or that they feel so brought into the thinking and the strategy that they feel really invested in terms of their time. The companies that are doing this and have created this ownership culture, they have a higher share price. They have higher sales and they're more highly regarded in terms of their community and pillars. So that means that you're going to have more customers who are coming. So this really is a bottom line issue. So one, think of it as such and treat it as such. A lot of times when we're investing and thinking about our employees, we say they're the most valuable resource. But when we talk about what we measure every day, we're like, did the share price go up or down? We say, what's the sales of this product and service? Have they gone up and down? We haven't really measured on a regular basis, right? What is the health of our actual people? And so for any leader in this moment that doesn't have their finger on the pulse of the health of their workforce, that is a challenge. And the only way you can get that is by asking, not once a year with those overviews. That's like the zero sum workplace. We'll ask you the things that matter to us once a year and then we'll get back to you maybe. What we're seeing these employers do in the win-win workplace, they're checking in with their employees on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, some of them more. They're analyzing what they find and they're using it to develop their talent strategy. And then they're going back, they're closing the loop with their employees and they're saying, this is what we heard and this is what we're doing. This is what we can't do. And this is what we can't do right now.
Yeah.
When that happened, we went in and interviewed employees and they're like, okay, so I don't like every decision, but like, I respect that they actually came back and told me what they were going to do.
Wow. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's all we all want. We want an audience and we want mutual respect. And these are
Wow.
just back to basics. That doesn't cost anything but time and attention.
That is huge. That's so true. Like people just want to be acknowledged and listened to, and then feedback of going, okay, this is where we're at. This is what we can do. We can paint the bathroom doors a different color or what, whatever is inexpensive. And this is maybe what we can't do and why. It's kind of like the mom going, no, you can't go to the birthday party with then that injustice trigger, right? What's a huge trigger inside the ego is injustice. And so if a employee just gets injustice everywhere they turn, or the employee gets understanding, listening, all those things, and their injustice trigger goes down and they feel heard and understood, what a different employee you would have. Let's turn the steering wheel a little bit on you. Let me ask you this. If I am a listener today and I am an employee, because a lot of listeners today are going to be employees, why am I buying your book? And how can I use your strategies as a upward helping my bosses, like my 16-year-old helps me and goes, Mom, you're crashing out, right?
Yes.
She helps me to be a better mom and call me out. How can employees that are listening today, who need their bosses to go, I have a 4-month-old at home. I need you to hear me, or I've been coming to you time after time. I need just a little bit of understanding and help, XYZ. How can employees use your methods to change their experience in the workplace?
Yeah, and this is the reason why I wrote this book, really. Um, I don't know about you, Meredith, but like I'm watching all the headlines. You see tech companies laying off people, the government laying off people. You're like, who is for the actual people and how
Yeah.
they are doing and how they're being treated? Despite those headlines, I have many case studies of companies who are doubling down and investing in their employees across various sectors. So there's not just one sector. So for employees, I want to say this should give you hope because they are people, companies doing different things, CEOs who are investing differently. Second, this book gives you a guide with actual data on how to advocate for yourself. And I always tell people, if you don't ask for anything, you won't have a chance to actually get it. And it's the way that you approach it. So what we've seen during the book is the employees who have gone in, who have the data from some of these case studies in the book and said, I am in this sandwich generation. I have caregiving with elderly parents and children. I saw that there's certain companies who've started offering childcare, and this is like the returns that they've seen for the business. And this is the impact. Have we considered something like that? And so most people will say, well, the manager might say no, or the manager might shut me down. But if we begin to ask for these things and more employees, they'll have to start listening. When you get a survey, when you're asked what could be helpful, offer that idea. When you're in your one-to-one manager, don't resort to our zero-sum workplace and thinking, gosh, what's personal is just on me. We've got to bring our managers into our thinking. They don't know. They're not mind readers. And so unless we share that with them and actually give them a chance to respond, we don't know what it is. And I think a lot of us have grown up in that zero sum. So we don't ask. I remember even myself, like I never told anyone that, student loan payments were taking up 95% of my paycheck.
Yeah.
Could there have been a difference? I don't know. But again, I didn't give my manager the benefit of the doubt. So I'm saying give your manager the benefit of the doubt. The third thing I would say, if nothing happens, you get to decide. This is the moment where you get to decide who you want to make rich. If nothing happens, that means that you should start looking for another employer who can better meet your needs. The best time to get a job is when you have a job. The
Yes.
best time to make friends is when you don't need them. Use LinkedIn, start doing some informational interviews, start with the companies that are in the book. All of them are hiring. And so I think that's the start. Like, we're voting with our dollars, we're buying from companies that are investing in workers. We are just supporting them and supporting this world that actually we want to see.
Yeah, that right now is watching what's happening with Target and Costco and all of these stores that people are really using their dollars to vote on and off the island at this point is pretty amazing to see that we do actually make a huge difference. And to your point, I have a very good friend who has health issues, and she was deciding between different job opportunities, and she stayed with her current employer. She's an excellent at what she does. She stayed with her current employer because they never gave her grief about taking off work for doctor's appointments, and rough health days, whatnot. And she delivers, and she loves to deliver because she delivers to people that care about her. And I think that that's what so many people are missing, is we're so stuck on the because I said so mentality. Um, when when I'm asking and looking at your 25,000 people that you got jobs in such a short period of time, what inspired you to do that? What in your background said, hey, this whole everything, the book, the career path, the 25,000 employees in 2 years, what brought you to where you wanted to have this as part of your journey?
Yeah, I had a pivotal experience growing up. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather worked at American Motors, which was then bought by Chrysler, and my grandmother was a nurse's aide. And I remember when my grandfather came home, me and my grandmother were sitting at the table, and he was so excited because Chrysler had bought their factory. And Chrysler at the time had the famed CEO, Lee Iacocca, and he was
Mhm.
known to turn around. And so the community had been afraid that this plant was going to close down. And I remember he came home that day. He called my grandmother Ma, and he's like, and he calls me Angie. He goes, Lee Iacocca bought our company. He's going to invest in people. He's going to turn this around. He was so excited. And I remember the hope in his eyes. They became a pillar of the community until they weren't. I remember a couple years later when he also came home and that factory closed down. I knew what it meant for our family, my grandfather to take early retirement. Some people were just laid off. And that feeling of seeing someone who felt that their employer was going to invest in them, how excited he was, and then seeing when that investment didn't actually happen and they left, it was a foundational experience for me in learning about the role of work in one's life. We spend a third of our lives at work, a third of our lives. And so this is the place when you look at the data and statistics that people think that they're going to be upskilled, they're going to be invested in, that they're going to be cared about. Those are the expectations when someone walks in the door. So any manager that's listening, any CEO, we need to understand what people are expecting, and we need to rise up in this moment. It's not enough that you're giving someone a paycheck. You got 42% of people who said they'd take a pay cut just to be able to work remotely. They would
Yeah.
take a pay cut to do so. And so really understanding, not that people just want to work from home, but really understanding why they want to work from home. I'm here in Boston. Unbeknownst to me, we have some of the worst traffic in the country. People are spending 2 hours on their commute to work,
Yep.
even though it's like 10 miles. And so the challenge with that is really understanding what those opportunity costs are and really being empathetic as a leader. And that's so important to know. To your point, Meredith, people want to know that you care about them. And if there's one thing I'd leave listeners, employers are sending millions of dollars, billions of dollars in programs for employees. I've not met one employer through my research that I've done at Harvard who says we don't believe in investing in people. The disconnect, though, you will see that 42% of people said the employer doesn't care about them. That's how they feel. There's a really disconnect in between the words and the actions. And what this book is doing is giving some strategies on how to close that gap so that employers, by listening to their employees, can actually invest in ways that matter most to a person's lived reality and their ability to show up and be engaged in work.
Yeah, and the listeners out there that are middle management, that are employees, you know, take this book, make it yours, bring idea to boss. Because a lot of times, your boss, again, may have the it's my way, the highway, because I said so mentality, which means they're probably not listening to podcasts. They're probably not reading the books. But that doesn't mean that you can take some nuggets in and say, oh, this is a Harvard backed research concept that X, if we have a pizza party once a month, or we volunteer at a local shelter as a team, the sales team. It actually builds camaraderie between everyone and they work better together. Use what you have in here and make it yours that works at your job with your boss and your ownership. And now we're actually building bridges. If your boss isn't someone who's really into learning, they might just get something from an employee who's read your book. I do have a couple questions for you because of what you've done here, and how successful you are. And I'm so excited for you. Like, New York Times bestseller, and this book just came out like a week ago.
Yeah, it came out on March 11th. And I've been blown away. Again, like I said, writing this, thinking about just trying to give business leaders an economic case for investing in people and saying literally how this is going to impact your financial bottom line.
And
So
then
it's
you make more money. Hey,
and
PS, and then you make more money.
so this is not the moral thing to do, which it is, or the right thing to do, which it is. This is like a business imperative. Like in this book, we're talking about good management practices.
Right.
And I think that's really important. And for employees, when we talk about this bestseller, employers are craving for this right now. I've
Yeah.
been on this nationwide book tour, and when people come up, they're like, finally, this is
Yeah.
what we've been saying. But I think employees have more power than they know. And it's really about the approach. It's about raising these concepts, doing them with curiosity, and giving your manager the benefit of the doubt. And then watching. I'm a researcher. I think evidence. Are people listening? Is your manager listening? How many ideas have you given to them? Have they not listened? This is good information for you. And saying, okay, we get to decide who we want to make rich. Is this the company that we want to give 1/3 of our lives to?
Yeah. Yeah. Unbelievable. So, question, do you have a mantra, and do you have a morning or night ritual?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first is when I think about the mantra, it's by this man teacher, Howard Thurman, and he goes, "Do what lights you up," because the world needs people who are lit up.
Yeah.
And I love that because it becomes my like guiding star when I decide what I'm going to do and say yes to, what I'm going to say no to. It's really like where I'm finding the energy. And conversations like this, I'm so glad that you invited me. This lights me up. Like using this book as a tool that can make someone's work life better, like, sign me up every day. And when I think about kind of nightly routine, for me, it's more of a morning routine. Every morning I wake up and I write like the 5 things that I'm grateful for the
Yeah.
day from the previous day. And that's so important for me. And I really think about, there's big things like New York Times bestselling book, but actually there's smaller things like last night, like my husband made a delicious, healthy dinner after I'd been on the road for a whole week. And so I always encourage people, we're always waiting for the big moments, but it's like the small moments that actually make a full life.
Yeah, I love that so much. And they say gratitude's the greatest prayer because it just brings more in. And so my last question, what's your why? Why do you do all this?
My why is because I grew up in that zero sum workplace. I saw my grandparents work in that zero sum workplace. And through my research, I've seen that there's a better way of that we can manage, that we can train, that we can enlist people. And I feel like with the workplace, there's so many headlines about toxic workplaces. You've got people who are quiet quitting. And when we think about we spend 1/3 of our lives there, we know that we can do work better. It doesn't have to be this way. And the
Yeah.
more that I see the companies that are doing and creating win-win workplaces, talking to CEOs who are doing things differently, I'm like, this needs to catch a fire. Like this
Yeah.
needs to go viral. And this gives people hope. And that's what we really need in this moment. We need hope.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad that I can play a small part in sharing some of these stories that inspire me.
Totally. So, New York Times bestseller, do not complain. Do not say you do not have a how-to. We now have the how-to. It is in writing. You can use it as an employee. You can use this as middle management, upper management, CEOs. You can use this for all the stations in a workplace. The win-win workplace, how thriving employees drive bottom line results by Dr. Angela Jackson, out now everywhere you can find books. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom here today. I so appreciate you, and I know that my audience does as well.
I do too. Meredith, thank you for having me. And I'd love to give a special offer to your book. We're
Yeah.
actually bringing the book live at the Win-Win Workplace Summit in May in Chicago. We're going to have 80 employers there who are actually investing in workers and sharing like the ROI they've received. Employees, everyone is welcome. To any of your listeners, if they go to winwinworkplacesummit.org, what they will get is a 20% and put in, if they want to register, a 20% discount on attending. Again, if someone's looking for their next opportunity, this is the place that they should actually be, because these are the employers across sectors who are doubling down on their investments in people. So they can go to winwinworkplacesummit.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. I appreciate you for being here. Everyone go check that out. I am in Chicago, so I might just go down there to be able to say hi to you and meet you.
Oh, I would
That's
love that. Please, you're invited as my guest. I would love to have you there.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Everyone, check out her book today. Buy it, change your life, change everyone in your family's life and your workplace. And I will see you guys all here next week. Thanks for listening. If you would like to connect on a more personal level, head over to meredythwillits.com or on Instagram at Meredyth with a Y for behind-the-scene footage and outtakes. Please subscribe and come back each week for more Meredyth with a Y.